Congratulations. So if you know our story, you know that in 2020, we bought our dream house on our dream farm in our dream location. And then just 3 years later, in 2023, we actually sold it. Many of you were along on that journey for us. You were with us at the farm. And while we loved that house and even more so loved that property, it was very expensive. And we just kind of got to the point where we were no longer willing to sacrifice our future financial goals to remain in that house on that property. So we did what some people may call crazy or some people may call simply practical. We sold the dream house and we bought a different house, half the size and for half the price. We bought an old stone cottage filled with charm, so much potential, but keyword is potential. It was a complete fixer-upper, probably had not been touched since the 80s. So basically everything needed to be redone. All of the not so fun stuff like a new septic tank and a new roof and all new electrical, so it was no longer knob and tube. But there was also room for me to really express my creativity and create a home that was uniquely ours. So we renovated the kitchen completely renovated our laundry room. We basically took it down to the studs. We opened up 2 walls to connect the dining room to the kitchen to make it a more cozy, livable space for my family. We also completely renovated the room right off of the kitchen, which we basically turned into our laundry room / butler's pantry. We also renovated the tiny little cottage bathroom on our main floor, which is not quite done yet. However, we did completely renovate and finish our upstairs bathroom, which is our kids' bathroom, into just like a dreamy woodland cottage bathroom. And we continued to tackle small design projects throughout the house to bring this house back to life in that English cottage style, but also making it uniquely ours. I have covered all of this here on my channel, and those of you who've been along with us, you've seen all these projects in real time. But what I'm super excited to be sharing in today's video is what we are starting to do with the exterior of the home. So we are essentially nestled in the woods, and we do have a couple of acres. However, most of that is woods. So as far as the exterior goes, we are really just working with woodland space and a pretty decent sized backyard. And having come from a farm and still really holding tightly onto that farm dream for us to be able to grow some of our own food, for our kids to grow up in that kind of magical environment, we have decided that we are just going to completely max out whatever is possible here on this property, and it's actually a lot more than we originally thought. So we are making the most of what we have, and we are basically trying to turn this little cottage home into a mini backyard farm. And I am so excited to be bringing you guys along on this journey. You can kind of see it all unfold. Now, we do already have a little bit of a farm vibe going on, and we have for several years now, because we have had laying hens, backyard chickens, for I think 5 years. So we've got our chickens, they're laying eggs, we get fresh eggs every day. We have to go out and collect them and take care of our chickens. So we've got a little bit of that going on, but there's so much more we want to expand on. As far as our flock goes, we have about 30 or so chickens. I feel like I can never keep track of the exact number. Chicken math is very real. And that feels like a really good, manageable number for us. We get a ton of eggs through the laying season. We're able to share the love and give them away to family and friends. But it's still very much like a simple backyard operation, which feels perfect for this property. Now, we do have goals to expand as far as chickens go in the future, but actually not laying hens. We would love to raise meat chickens, which yes, means we would have to butcher them. But I think it's something that both my husband and I are very interested in, feel up to tackling. Might do it this summer or this fall, might wait till next year, but it's definitely something that we kind of want to get our hands into. I feel like it's a really good way to venture into your own meat production in a way that's not like raising cows, which that is certainly not something that we can do here. We also have dreams of having beehives out there. We also think that we could definitely raise some pigs here also for meat production. need to look into more of the specifics of that, but I do think that's something that's very attainable here on this property and something that we're really excited about tackling in the future. But another dream that we have officially kind of kicked off here on the property is building out our dream kitchen garden. With living in a fixer-upper and always having projects going on in addition to just crazy normal life, I have learned just how important it is for me to really take care of myself so that I can keep up. And one of the many ways I intentionally take care of my body is through supplements. And one of my favorite supplements that you guys know I love is Element. Element is hands down my favorite electrolyte drink mix out there. They have such simple ingredients, so no fillers, no colors, no added sugar, no artificial ingredients whatsoever. So you get the electrolytes that you want without any of the additives that you don't. You just mix it right into your water, so it's a super easy way to replenish key electrolytes like sodium, potassium, and magnesium. Especially now that it's summertime, we're all outside in the heat having fun, but we're also doing what? We're doing a lot of sweating, which means we are losing those electrolytes much faster. So we need to be extra careful about replenishing them so that our body can function at its most optimal level. And electrolytes are critical for so many different processes throughout the body. For example, energy production, DNA repair, muscle synthesis, regulating blood glucose, regulating blood pressure, getting restful sleep, fluid balance in the body, clearing waste out of cells, the list goes on. Electrolytes are so important to our everyday cell function. So I love that Element is just a super easy way to replenish those electrolytes without any of the added sugar or other additives. Right now, Element is offering my viewers a free sample pack with every order. That's 8 single serving packets with any Element order. This is such a great way to try a lot of their different flavors because they have a lot and you can kind of figure out which one's your favorite. You can get yours at drinkelement.com/Becca Bristow. And this deal is only available through my link. So go to drinklmnt.com/Becca Bristow to get yours. Gardening is such an incredible way to grow your own produce. And what's cool about gardening is it can literally be done anywhere. We have, in the 4 homes that we've lived in since we've been married, we have started gardens in 3 of those homes. Gotta be honest with you, I'm ready to never do this again because building and filling and starting raised beds is no small feat, but we have started gardens over and over and it's so worth it every time. But here on this property, because we really do plan to hopefully be here for a long time, we just decided to go for it. We're building the dream. We're not waiting, around like we did in previous houses, which I'm glad we did now looking back. But we want to build basically a massive fenced in garden. So we are going to scale up to that. I'll show you, I have this is basically like an amateur sketch of kind of the idea I'm going for. Now I want to see how this season goes with what I'm growing based on the sunlight that we have before we move forward with any of those other plans, really, because I'm just kind of testing it out this year. But to start my garden this year, it actually started in the winter and it started indoors before we had any kind of gardening infrastructure outside. So I started majority of what we're growing. I started all of the seeds to grow seedlings inside that will eventually move out to the garden. But before we were able to move the seeds outside, we had to actually have something to plant them in. And I did talk about this in a previous video, and I was sharing with you guys that I was kind of grappling with, do we go raised beds, which is what I've always done in the past. I feel like it's you can't go wrong with raised beds. But I was really toying with the idea of doing an in-ground garden because it wouldn't require any infrastructure and it might be a lot easier. And also I went down this Martha Stewart rabbit hole and she's all about in-ground gardening. But ultimately I decided to go with raised beds, and that's mainly because we do get a little bit of water, there's some water issues down in the area where the garden is built with it pooling sometimes, and I just knew that we needed some well-draining soil, so we just decided to go a little bit easier but kind of foolproof, the raised bed option. So we built Matt built 3 raised beds to start. We are going to expand on this, but we're going to kind of scale up over this next year or 2. But we started with the 3 raised beds and picked pretty much the only area on this property that could support a fruit and vegetable garden. It's the only area that is flat and not on any kind of incline, because along with living in the woods, we also live on a hill, which poses another challenge. But this is a relatively flat spot that get sun most of the day. So I think it will turn out well, but again, you almost never really know until you go through a season and kind of see how it goes. So we have our raised beds, but we also have a lot of deer here, and then also we have all of our chickens, so we needed a way to keep them out. And in the past, we've always just kind of made like makeshift fences, which were fine and they totally worked. But since we really wanted to kind of go for this and just build the dream, we decided to build a fence. And Matt built the fence for us. He totally knocked it out of the park. He got it done in record time. This was not the first fence he's ever built. He built a fence on the farm property when we had goats. But this was actually even easier because it didn't have to be as sturdy for animals like climbing on it. But we basically just put a bunch of 8-foot 4x4s, I think, just like cemented those holes into the ground with, with those poles, connected them all with 2x4s, and then he just wrapped this fencing material around that is good for keeping deer out, which is our biggest concern, obviously, along with the chickens. Kind of a silly design choice, but I went back and forth about whether or not to stain it, and I kind of just wanted to leave it the natural wood, but the types of wood, we had 2 different types of wood, and they were obviously 2 very different colors, so we did decide to stain it. My only regret, and I only want to mention this so that nobody else makes this mistake, the guy at Home Depot recommended this certain kind of stain from the same brand that I'm familiar with, but he knew we were doing a fence, and he recommended this. It's like thicker, it's just like a thicker stain than just like the typical Minwax one that I would normally buy. And the only thing I didn't like about it is obviously it's thicker, so it just went on so much darker than I was anticipating. So if I had known that, I definitely would have selected a different color. It's not exactly what I was envisioning, but again, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. If it's gonna keep the deer out and the chickens out and allow us to grow food, it's all good. We also obviously had to fill our raised beds to get them prepped for planting. We did try and put in a ton of wet leaves to kind of pack the beds to take up a little more space, because being in the woods, we have a ton of leaves all over the ground. So we just wanted to kind of use those. They did help up maybe a little bit, but we mostly filled them with just like a 50-50 like soil compost mix that we got delivered by truck from a local landscape supply. Once our fence was up and our beds were all nice and filled, I was able to start planting. This is always a very exciting day because after months of tending to these little seedlings and bringing them outside every day, a week leading up to this to harden them off, it's always really exciting to just get them outside. It's also really nerve-wracking because they're so tiny. You're like, are you ever going to survive? And a lot of the time, some of them don't. But alas, I'm always ready to start and do it all over again the next year. So I wanted to share with you guys exactly what I am planting and what I plan to grow this year. So since we're getting kind of a late start because we didn't have any of the infrastructure, I didn't do any like cool season crops this year. So I'm kind of diving right into the warm and like hot season summer crops. So I planted 3 different varieties of tomato. I have a cherry tomato, a paste tomato, and then also just like a big beefy slicing tomato. I planted 2 different varieties of cucumbers, one that's good for slicing and then one that's good for pickling. I definitely plan to make our own pickles this summer and can them. I also planted a ton of onions. I've had pretty good success with trying to grow my own onions in the past, but as far as veggies go, that's actually it for this year, which feels like not that much. And I'm already excited to scale up and have like double the beds, at least those 6 raised beds this or next year. But in these beds, I'm also packing in a ton of different herbs. So I've got a ton of chives growing, so much basil because I love fresh basil, but I also love homemade pesto. So I'm hoping to be able to make lots of batches of that and freeze it. We planted cilantro and dill seeds. Those are 2 herbs I love to have on hand for cooking. I also planted a bunch of rosemary, which is another favorite, some sage, and some thyme as well. I also forgot that I did also plant some zucchini as well, so I'm excited for that. The only other thing I planted in the beds were a few marigolds kind of in the corners of each bed, just to act as a pollinator to attract more of those pollinators to my garden, and also to just provide a little beauty along with all of the veggies and the herbs. And then I do plan on doing a fall planting. I don't know if we'll have the next 3 raised beds set up yet or if I'll just be taking some things out to put the fall plants in, but I've got carrots, I've got kale, I've got lettuces, I've got snap peas, and I think that might be it, or I might have a couple other things that I'm planting. Oh, garlic. I'm gonna also plant garlic to grow over the winter. So I'm hoping to kind of get a 3-season garden going where we've got food coming up in spring, in summer, and in fall. And as far as future plans for the garden, so I obviously am gonna be doing 3 more raised beds on the other side. We're hoping to have space, or we will have space in the middle, which I might put a table in there to have some kind of seating, but also it's open growing space that I could also just add more raised beds in that area if I wanted to scale up even more. I would love to have some raised, like skinny little raised beds along the sides of the fence, kind of raised up higher, whether that's for growing more food or for cut flowers, but just more growing space added. And then we also left some space in the very back of the garden where I would love to plant some fruit. Now, I don't know if fruit trees would, I think it might be just too small of a space, and I also don't know if we get enough sun being right up against the woods for fruit trees to actually thrive and grow anything there. But I do think that I could probably get away with some berry bushes, and I'm hoping to get those planted next year because I know it takes a few years for them to really start to produce. And then for adding a touch of beauty, maybe next year I would love to add some just plain flower garden beds in the front of the fence on either side of the gate, so we can just really bring in more beauty, all the flowers, and really it's the only planting spot I have that's basically full sun. Everywhere else on our property is either full shade or like part shade, part sun. So there's definitely some plants like peonies, which are my favorites, that I definitely want to get planted in those areas because I have to have those here somewhere on this property. Okay, you guys, so that is what's going on here on our little mini backyard farm. We've got the garden going and it's very exciting, and I am so excited to be bringing you guys along as we continue to scale this up. You'll be able to see the progress through the years. You will have to let me know down in the comments below what you think, how the garden is coming along, how everything looks, and if there's anything that, you know, if anyone who is out there who has built a garden or is growing food, if there's something that you wish that you had started or wish that you were growing that you weren't, I would love to hear it because I always love those tips. That is all I have for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.